Hello, everyone. So, I've been asked to sort of give a history of this journey with Hadi and aplastic anemia. We'll see how much of it I can get through without crying, and hopefully you'll be able to understand all of it. So, I wrote down a few dates to jog my memory of how this all began. September 5th, 2017, a day after spending a lovely Labor Day weekend at the Renaissance Festival. I thought it would be best to get Hadi checked out after his twin brother, threw a book at him. And he had a black eye, but I didn't think much of the black eye. But he had a lot of bruising on his back that I was pretty sure his brother didn't cause. And after some Google research, I thought it best to take him to his pediatrician. His pediatrician thought it was something called ITP, meaning low platelets, and asked us to go immediately to the ER in Fairfax, Inova Children's. When we got there, we discovered that Hadi's platelets were at 1,000. If I remember correctly, a child his age should have platelets around 140,000. So we were admitted, and around 2 a.m., the hematologist came by and said that he wanted to run some more tests. And so the next day, I watched Hadi be put under anesthesia for his first bone marrow transplant. His first bone marrow biopsy. We were then told a few days after that it wasn't leukemia, but we still had to hear them tell us we weren't sure what it was. So a few days after that, we were told it was aplastic anemia, and that the only cure was a bone marrow transplant from a sibling. So we then made Zachariah get tested, who willingly got a poke. We waited a couple of weeks and discovered Hadi and Zachariah were not bone marrow matches, and so we were told to go through immunotherapy at the NIH. With immunotherapy being ATG, involving ATG and a drug called Ultramapag. Rather than getting too much into the medical side of things, basically, I realized how hard it was to watch my child shake a lot because of ATG. But Hadi, because he's incredibly strong and brave, got through those 4 days, and then we waited to see if anything would happen, if his white cell count would increase. Aplastic anemia basically means Hadi's bone marrow doesn't produce anything of what it's supposed to. Red blood cells, white blood cells, or platelets. And the white blood cells are needed to fight off any infections. Hadi continued to get fevers, and it was at that point that we were told to start looking into a bone marrow transplant option. I was terrified at that point because I wasn't sure Hadi would have any matches. Being South Asian, we were skeptical. I made the doctor repeat about 5 times that luckily Hadi had many unrelated full matches. Anyway, we started the process of that bone marrow transplant. Hadi's first donor was extremely quick and enthusiastic, and we started conditioning, a word I now know all too well, of getting Hadi ready for his first transplant, of involving ATG, yet again. Chemotherapy. And then his transplant on December 7th. Coincidentally, his half birthday. Hadi was incredible through all of it. Through the chemo, everything. Then we waited, and we were told that Hadi's first transplant only half took. And so we went through 2 donor lymphocyte infusions to hopefully make the second part of the transplant take. The myeloid part took, but the lymphocyte part did not. So that was waiting 6 weeks each for each of those donor lymphocyte infusions. And we were told, that's Hadi coughing. You okay, buddy? Then we were told to move forward with a second transplant because luckily there were enough cells from that first donor. So we did that we did that transplant on May 4th. Hence, the fascination began with Star Wars. Hadi went through another round of ATG, of chemotherapy, and of radiation. Full body radiation. Anyway, so we waited again. And luckily, we didn't wait too long before it was decided that that transplant also did not take. And that Hadi's body just wasn't a big fan of those cells from his first donor. Hadi still has a huge desire to meet his first donor because, in his words, she wanted to help me. I think it's clearly obvious why we have such a strong connection to be the match now and want to support. So, third transplant discussion started happening with the same conditioning regimen, with something different, but with a different donor. And luckily, we went back to the drawing pool, and Hadi had enough donors. And yet again, he had a donor who was very willing and went through the process quickly. However,